Okay, in the last video, we talked about Freudian defense mechanisms and how they are used to keep unwanted energy and urges and drives of the id out of our everyday life and our behaviors. So, one of the things I want to talk about is in the bigger scheme of reconnecting to our emotional life and to the people around us, we will naturally have emotional urges, an urge to connect, to hug. There's sexual urges, there's urges to form relationships. And in the middle of that, we have our various emotions. So all the different emotions have different social constructions. So, for example, it is socially accepted for women to cry in many Western societies, but it is not socially accepted for men to cry. And there's many reasons for that. Just the same, it is socially acceptable for men to be angry. And in some places, it's socially acceptable for men to swear. In other places, it's socially acceptable for them to become physically violent. And in some places, they can only express it and just say angry things. And in many places, it's not socially acceptable for women to be angry. So, all that said, we have our emotions that are kind of moving from our id, our unconscious, into our conscious world. And society is then pushing back in a different way. The part of the ego is to be aware of those urges and how they're moving. So, we have the social construction of sadness. Men are not allowed to cry, right? So the sadness starts moving into our conscious awareness. We have the superego construct saying it's not okay, and it pushes back. The ego, if it's not being mindful and non-judgmental, may automatically do this. It may, quote, repress the urge and instinct to cry and just stay out of our conscious mind. It may regress. We may move to a younger level of functioning. Or it may take that energy, since being sad is not okay, may switch it into something else, such as anxiety or anger or shame. So, if our ego is functioning well, we may then look at that urge to cry and notice, does it make sense? Do I want to follow this social construct of the superego, or do I want to allow myself to feel it? And we can see here how the superego creates culture. If in a culture men are not allowed to cry, that's what they do, and it takes a huge amount of effort to change our lived experience. We also notice that the superego and the cultural pressure to not experience sadness actually kind of creates pathology within people, right? Because there's an ethical consideration. Is it good to cry and be sad? Should I be sad? Now, we know the whole conversation about shoulds. If you want to fit well into that society, you should block your sadness so that you are well adjusted and your behavior doesn't cause discomfort to other people, and you are then not shamed for expression of some inner part of yourself. Now, that becomes a really interesting conversation of what is actually good for society and good for people, and do we want that? Now, I'm sure you can imagine very quickly that we don't have the energy to change everything because you're pushing it uphill, right? You also can imagine that you don't trust everyone with all of your instincts and urges, right? You become sad and tearful with the people that you trust emotionally, who you are willing to be vulnerable with, people that you know will not punish you for expressing some part of yourself. Now, you can hear in there the role of validation. You are validated that, oh, your sadness makes sense. Oh, I hear that you just lost your job. It makes sense to me why you're sad. And those are validating functions, right? And that essentially says, in this part of society, the superego isn't shaming you or judging you for this instinct and urge that's moving. So I hope that's helpful, and let me know if you have any questions.